Turtles are the biggest problem, and I can only have a handful in at a time because I just don't have the capacity to keep them. But turtles are very high on the surrender list. If I took them all in, I'd be overrun. I get calls all the time, so
It seems to me that an ever-present issue in our hobby, the reptile keeping community, is we will have animals that need another home or need to be transferred from one home to another, whether that's overproduction or just their life situation changes and they can no longer care for the animals they keep. The fact that reptiles are mainly or often very rugged and live quite long. Of course, that's a generalization, but that does lend them to being animals that need to be rescued quite often. Now, today I'm talking to Jordan Lindon of Midland Reptile Rescue. He's a relatively new rescue in the UK, and we discuss sort of the concept of like, what's the function the reptile rescue should serve in our community. Now, of course, it's obvious, taking care of the animals that no longer have adequate homes, but the way we discuss it is more understanding the rescue as a stepping stone from one hopefully ideally good home to another ideally good home, rather than this sort of dumping ground for animals that people can't care for anymore. Because people's life change, situations change, people have to get rid of an animal here or then. It's not really about judging those people. It's about making sure we have steps in place to help those animals and to help the people, because sometimes there's a lot of guilt that goes along with no longer being able to care for an animal. Now, I really want this episode to land on those people who are incredibly compassionate, who can see themselves wanting to start a rescue, because so many times we have reptile rescues even come on the podcast, and within a year that rescue no longer exists because it is so challenging to run and so financially draining that many people cannot continue with this. So I hope that if you are somebody who can actually conceive yourself starting a rescue or really wants to, this is an episode for you. It will teach you some of the things that you have to use or some of the tactics to use to make sure that you aren't going to fail. And I think at the end of the day, the promotion of having more, smaller rescues is probably a good idea, rather than trying to have people create these huge rescues and then eventually fail. It would be better if there's many people who are willing to kind of run rescues this way to help those animals and to overall make the community a more positive place. So if you are wanting to start a reptile rescue, this is definitely an episode for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. As you notice, the podcasts are probably starting to get a little bit fewer and far between. We just had another baby in our house, so life is very busy. So probably through the summer, there's going to be some longer stretches between episodes, but I'm going to try my best to keep it going. I think that's all I have to say. Enjoy this episode, and I will see you afterwards. There are different styles of thermostat, on, off, or dimming. Personally, I much prefer a dimming thermostat because I run essentially all halogen heating in my reptile room, and I don't want those bulbs turning on and off to control temperature and stressing out the animal and strobing out all day. I would much rather the bulb either dim or increase in power to control the temperature, and that can only be done with a dimming thermostat. That's why I'm so excited to tell you more about a brand new product from ZooMed, the ReptiTemp dimming thermostat. If you're interested in learning more about that, stick around through the rest of the episode and you'll find out more. This podcast is all about improving your reptile husbandry. However, I know not everybody has the time or the money to go out and spend thousands of dollars doing custom builds. Thankfully, friend of the podcast, Josh Halter, aka the Bio Dude, is working hard to make better care more accessible. He makes turnkey bioactive kits for leopard geckos, ball pythons, tortoises, invertebrates, dart frogs, and the list continues to grow. He has spent years testing and perfecting these handcrafted substrates and dietary supplements to create the most effective products. If you visit thebiodude.com, you will see he is a proud supporter of both USARK and responsible reptile keeping, and there is an option to donate to either at checkout. Jordan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
thanks for having me.
Looking forward to it. I mean, I've had a few people over the years who have been spearheading a rescue, and it's a very difficult conversation quite often. So I'm always happy to kind of revisit it and see how other people are tackling it, because not only is it difficult just because there's the sadness of the animals, but there's also just the challenges of actually pulling it off successfully without ending up underwater yourself. So I'm curious, maybe we just jump into what motivated you to actually start a reptile rescue?
Well, I'd say all my life, since a very, very young kid, I've been obsessed with reptiles, specifically reptiles. I mean, I've always loved animals, but I've always been gravitated towards reptiles. My family are animal mad, so it was an easy transition. And then obviously I'd come home from school, watch Steve Irwin. And then I think I got my first snake around 9, 10 at Christmas. And I kind of fell in love since and not looked back. It's not something that I've been like openly talk about, like, my friends didn't know. And as I've got older, I've got a bit more time, and I've always been looking, sad stories you see online, about animals needing help. There's a thing in the UK called pre-loved. I don't know if you get it in Canada and the US, but it's a bit like Craigslist where you see animals who probably need a bit more help. They've been kept in bad conditions. And all my life, I've just kind of rescued some, give them better homes. And yeah, I just thought I've got the time now. Let's do it on a bigger scale. And yeah, that's why I wanted to do it.
So your actual job is fairly flexible, right? I think you're a personal trainer, or
Yeah, so I co-own a gym with my family, so it works quite well. There's a
okay.
couple of us. So, and then I do a bit of coaching as well. And it's literally like right next to my house, so I can get back in time, to meet people, bring them into my house, etc. So it works quite well at the moment.
And did you have a vision for what you wanted the rescue to turn into, or was it more just like you said, you're looking on the pre-loved websites and you're like, I kind of feel bad for these animals, so I'm going to bring them in and then hopefully eventually adopt them back out, or what was your thought process?
Yeah, so obviously when I bought my home years and years ago, I had my animals and then I started getting a few more. I started enjoying it, but I think I wanted something that I don't know if you find there's like an empty void sometimes when you're keeping. Like as
Yes.
much as you do up enclosures, you want something else, and this is what give me that. And obviously they're with me for a short term, but the feeling of seeing them go on to do better things with people who are going to keep them for years and years is a good feeling to me, and that's why I wanted to do it. But to answer your question, yeah, that's kind of where it started.
Yeah, because it is hard. I mean, quite often that's why I like to have this conversation, because there's so many people that their instinct is to, okay, maybe I should do some kind of rescue, because I do see a lots of these animals online, and you're right, it can sort of fill that need to want something new without going to buy something new,
Yeah,
and you're not necessarily contributing to the oversupply issue, but it
yeah,
can get yourself into issues where it's like you have too many to keep and it's expensive. Like there's no way around it. You are still the caregiver for all these animals. So did you like did you think about that, or were you just like, I'm going to start with this and see if I can actually make this work financially and see how it goes?
yeah. So I mean, I think I had a bit of a run up. It's always something I wanted to do, and I've spoke to a lot of people over the past few years. I'd say people in the UK, and that's the one thing I'd say about the UK is there's a lot of good people. There's a lot of good rescues already out there, and there's a lot of good pet shops. And over the years, I've kind of picked nuggets from people, spoke to them, and I've always been toying with it. And it wasn't until my girlfriend actually pushed me to do it, because I was a bit nervous about doing it, and I thought, you know what, why not? Got the time, want to do it, so I did do it properly, and I took my time with it. Um, but yeah, so remind me the question. I'm going on a bit of a
Oh
ramble.
yeah, no, I was just as far as like thinking about the long term expense of doing something like this. Like,
Yeah.
did you think of that? Did you think like, okay, this is going to cost me thousands of dollars, whatever it is, or was it more like I want to rescue these animals and be there for them, and hopefully the math will work out?
Yeah, it was kind of just, jumped into it. I would say I had an idea of not necessarily business, but like, the way to communicate with people. And, for example, I've done everything properly. Like I've had forms, I'll make sure I've got people's contact details, I'll make sure people leave me a review. So I was happy that it would grow pretty fast,
Mm.
like Google rankings and stuff, and which it has done. So the good thing is I've been managed to get the animals in, but they've been found homes, mostly within 6 months, which is, for me, is a good turnaround.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you perceive as the demand right now? Are you getting phone calls? Like how often are people bringing you animals? I'm sure at this point you're not going out to pre-love to find stuff. People are calling you.
No, no, I stopped all that as soon as I'd done the rescue, but I'm getting calls. Facebook's a big platform for me, but mainly it's Google. So there's not many in the Midlands. So I managed to get, like 50 odd reviews now. So I'm kind of up there with some of the others, which is great. And we actually do work well together. There's another one in the Midlands called Proteus Reptile Trust, who've been here since the 90s, I believe. And obviously they were always full. So sometimes they'd, refer people to me and vice versa. So it works quite well. And obviously I've been picking, people's brains over the years. Another rescue I spoke to years ago was Jelly Exotics. She probably don't remember this, but she helped me out a lot. There's a guy called Matt from Rossendale Rescue, and you've got Cheshire Reptile Rescue and all them. So everyone's good in the UK, and everyone's been really helpful, to be honest.
Yeah, there's going to be no shortage of animals, so it's not like your competitors.
No, 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 no. I think that's what I mean. The community is nice. I feel like in the UK, there's not many. It's not many people who are greedy. I'd say everyone wants to help, which is
Mm.
good,
And
including
so,
the pet, including the pet shops.
oh yeah, that's good. The pet shops, yeah, it's nice to have them on the same page. And
Yeah,
how often are you being contacted to have somebody surrender an animal?
weekly. I think I had the busiest week we had was 15, which is
Oh
for
my
me was
gosh.
quite a lot being at home. But yeah, that's probably on the high end. I'd say maybe 3 to 5 a week.
And
Um,
can you accept all those, or you start, or are you kind of at a cap?
yeah, so I'm at a cap with certain species, and I'll maybe give people like a time frame of when I could help them. And usually people wait because they know that they're going to go into good homes. But yeah, I'd say like royals and corns, I have to have a bit of a delay at the moment. But typically we kind of rehome, I'd say around 10 a month at the moment. So I'm happy with that. I'd say 10 animals a month, maybe 15 on a good month.
And so,
So
would you say that it's the corn snakes and the ball pythons? That's your main
yeah,
surrender
yeah.
animals.
I'd say royals and corn snakes, and then you got your leopard geckos, your bearded dragons. I'd say the most surrendered animals, but more the wild type corn. Sorry, not wild type corns. Wild type royals are the biggest ones we've got at the moment in terms of. I don't know whether it's a breeding thing where they kind of just not really looked at, but there's a lot in rescues, and I know there's a lot in other rescues too. Um, they kind of just get filtered down, don't they? So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Do you get a sense of why somebody is surrendering it? I'm sure you've heard of everything, but is there like a common thread between many people? I mean, because sometimes from people who are real hardcore reptile keepers, they like, you should never get rid of your animal; it should be there with you forever. But people's
Yeah.
life change, things happen where you have to move animals along or find something. But is there a common reason?
Typically, it's people have had them from the children and they no longer want them. Maybe they've gone to university. With tortoises, a lot of it is, people's passed away. I've had that a few times,
Mm,
because they live for so long. Um, but yeah, it's normally, circumstances have changed. They can no longer look after animal or they're not giving them the time. And I think rather than selling them independently, they trust that by going through a rescue, they're going to find the right homes that they need. And I think it gives people peace of mind at the end of the day.
yeah. And so when they surrender, they're not. Do they pay to do that, or how does that financially work?
No, no. So we take them in completely free of charge. Yeah, and if they want to kind of donate enclosures, stuff like that, they can do, which helps us out. Obviously, we've got that many animals, but typically, yeah, people will drop them down to me, or if they're local, I'll go and collect them. We'll get them in, make sure they're healthy over the, maybe a month period, say, and then start looking for long-term homes.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely a big project. So, can you describe? Are these animals in your basement, or where are they in your home? And how do you have it set up so it's not just like maybe it is pretty chaotic. I'm sure there's probably an element of chaos in there because you probably have different enclosures and different things. But how do you keep this organized, and how do you set it up, like even quarantine wise?
So when the animals first come in, we'll do the initial assessments. I've got a shed and a garage, so I've got two spaces. And I've made a pact with my girlfriend. I said that no animals will enter the house, so they all go out to the outer building, and it works quite well. I'm doing treatment every month for mites, just a preventative measure, with Taurus and things like that. So I'm quite hot on that because, as you know, with that many animals coming in, it could be a breeding ground for stuff like that. And then in terms of treatment, we have to treat a lot of them with burns and stuff like that. So I've met some really good people and some good friends who've helped me out because I'm not going to sit here and say I know everything. I don't, but I just try my best. And I've got some very knowledgeable friends, so they help me out a lot as well in terms of that.
And then, as far as financially, you don't necessarily have to get into the numbers itself, but is this it's costing you money? I'm sure. Like you're not breaking even.
No. I'd say on some months we break even, which I'm happy with because I do it for the love of it. But most months we have vet visits, so we've got a good vet, but obviously it's still a cost at the end of the day. So the donations that we get back through, whether it's just a random donation of someone or when someone adopts an animal, they basically cover the food, the electric, and all that. So it works quite well in terms of that because it just makes sure that I don't think any rescue could survive without it at the end of the day because no one's going to keep plugging their own money in at the end of the day. So people rely on it and so to make sure it works.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the common things. I've had a few people, like I said, I had a few rescues on, and I'm trying to think. There's several of them that are not functioning anymore, just because it gets to a point where they just cannot do it. I mean, you cannot sacrifice your own well-being beyond a certain point. And like long term, do you think, okay, eventually we can get this to a break even? We'll make it to a point where, because you don't want to be bleeding your own cash every month. As nice as it is, but that's not sustainable.
There's no way I would ever stop doing the rescue. I love it that much. But what I will say is, I think having the right people around you helps. I think if you don't have the support network, it can get overwhelming. And And obviously, I don't know if people do it, but some people have their own premises and stuff like that. That comes with costs. I'm quite happy at the moment to, make it part of my home, to make it sustainable. I think it's important that you try and keep your costs low as well, because at the end of the day, it's not a business, but you're going to have overheads, you're going to have vet bills. So you don't want to get yourself out of, into the frying pan, so to speak, of another problem. So yeah, I think having good people around you is important, but knowing what you're getting into is also very important.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just going to get the animals that need help.
Exactly. It sounds like nice and easy, you get an animal in, then you adopt them, you get a bit of money. But that's where you get the wrong people trying to do it for flipping, and they flip animals. They might do it on a small scale, but it's not good, and you do see a lot of it. This is why we was talking earlier about the legislations. I think it would be a good thing for a lot of rescues to be legislated, and making sure, we encourage the good ones to come forward and make it, something that we can help, long term with the mission, because there's so many animals in the UK that are just passed around. You see it on Facebook groups, I'll swap this for that, like it's a Pokemon card. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just getting worse, especially the lower tier animals. When I say lower tier, I mean like, your corn snakes, your royals, things that are easy accessible. They just move house to house to house.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just like hot potato with the snake.
Hot potato, yeah.
So when you say legislation, do you mean that having maybe the government or somebody come in to like certify these places to make sure they're operating correctly? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
I mean, some rescues would probably disagree with me. I know there is some good people who probably do disagree with me, but I just think that from what you see online now, there's that many, not necessarily hoarding's the wrong word, but people do hoard animals, and they probably shouldn't, and then they'll try and flip them for a profit, and it just gets like that. And there's some people who will call themselves a rescue, but it's not really a rescue, because when it gets time to go to the vets and you've got to pay £600 out on an x-ray, they probably won't want to do it. Do you know what I mean? So
yes, totally. Yeah.
A different ball game. So I do think it would be good. And then if there is a legislation, there might be ways then of generating more support for the good rescues and helping out the animals, because, there do needs to be some more support, I believe. And pet shops are great, and I understand, they have to do what they have to do. But if they can work together more with rescues, I believe that we can have a bigger impact, because there's so many animals that come in from the rescues that have just been sold to anybody. There needs to be like what do you call it? Like a link, a healthy link, because everyone can prosper if they do it properly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. Do you have any cases or animals that come to mind as far as memorable things that you've either had people surrender or that you've had to go collect somewhere?
Yeah, I had a few. We had a corn snake surrendered once, and within 2 days she laid eggs. Then she was egg bound, so I had to take her to the vets, and that was £600 later. That was in my second month as well, so that was a wake up call. But that was one of them. Typically, you're going out and people are sad to let their animals go, and it, it feels good to help people out. But you do get some cases where, like I've said, people have hoarded them over the years. They come in with burns, scale rot, and you have to treat them. So if you went to the vet every time for that, it would be expensive. So thank God I've learned how to do certain things, and I've got good friends to help me, treat the little bit,
Yeah, like surface wounds and whatnot. You can't go to the vet for every single one of those.
Yeah, exactly. It would add up, but there is some bad cases. I mean, I seen one, I think it was Knaresborough Rescue. I think I'm pronounced that right. They're in the UK. Lovely guy as well who runs that. But they went into, I think it was like an apartment, and there was like 70 royals abandoned in a rack, and they had to collect all of them. So I don't know how to manage that, but this is what I mean. There's some good people out there, but we just need to support them more.
Yeah. And I guess financially, you could eventually do something like a fundraiser or something along those lines to help bolster your bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important, but like I said, unless there needs to be a legislation or something where people know who they're donating to is legit. And that's what I feel like. You know what I mean? Totally. That's how I feel, but I know a lot of people probably disagree with that, because it is a lot of paperwork and stuff, but I feel like if you're going to do it right,
Yes.
And then you can then start connecting with the right people, the right pet shops, and pet shops could maybe say, okay, I recommend you go to here, and we could recommend you go to pet shop for your supplies, and it becomes like a big circle,
Yeah, exactly. And you'd mentioned there before we started recording with the legislation, is there active threats to some animals being more likely to be banned, or what's the situation there? Or is that just kind of what I see on social media?
I'm not too sure if I'm going to be honest. So I don't want to speak out of turn. However, the amount of big snakes that, I think should be looked at, a lot of pet shops would probably agree that, selling green anacondas, reticulated pythons.
I thought you
So
couldn't do that in the UK.
you can, yeah, you
Oh,
can. I
okay.
just don't think, I think certain pet shops don't do it now. I think Chaz from Snake and Adder said that. I don't think he sells stuff like that, but you can sell them. From what I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they're not, banned under any law. But I think certain animals should be looked at because if someone picks up a green anaconda, it's going into a rescue in 5 years. You just know,
Hmm.
unless they've got an amazing enclosure, like the guy you had on from Jurassic Ark Encounters, something like
Yes.
that. That's amazing. But the most normal person wouldn't be able to provide that in a house.
Exactly. And it's very confusing when you're buying a snake that's a foot and a half or 2 feet
Yeah,
long and it's going to turn into this absolute monster. Do you get
yeah,
people relinquishing like large snakes like that to you, or is it mostly like
yeah.
boas kind of being the max?
Boas are what we've had mostly in terms of big snakes, but you do get your berms, your retics pass through. Just geared down to size, or they've struck at the glass once and someone's scared, something like that. Or they've had kids, they don't want the kids around it. But these are things that should be spoken about before they get the animal,
For
'cause it's a
sure.
shame that they just go in there for a short term and then they'll end up at a rescue and then they'll just keep bouncing around for 20 odd years, which is such a shame.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it really is. And so, how many animals do you basically, roughly, do you have under your roof right now between the two buildings, and how much time are you having to spend every day just to keep things up and running?
We've got about 15 at the moment. I'd
Okay, that's
say
not too bad.
not too bad, yeah. Obviously, I don't believe in racks long term, but for things like corn snakes, royals, they work quite well for a temporary housing. So
Mhm.
it's not all vivs. I'd say 2 3 hours a day, I get everything done. That's feeding, watering, changing the water, spot cleaning. If we've got an animal in that's a bit more of an issue, obviously it might take a bit longer. For example, we get a lot of tortoises with like vitamin A deficiency, so we've got to give them eye drops, and the snakes with burns. That may take a bit longer on those particular weeks, but if everyone's healthy and good, I'd say a couple of hours a night.
Hmm.
All done.
I guess you will become very proficient in recognizing just basic issues, like health issues in animals, because there's probably so many familiar ones.
Yeah, I do. I mean, have a few mistakes as well. Like I'm not perfect. I'm not a vet, so I try my best to see what I can. But I miss things too, and that's why it's good to lean on other people. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I guess I should say like it's not a promotion to do your own veterinary care, but if you have a good vet to support you, you can learn how to do some
yeah,
basic things like burns and vitamin A drops, those sort of stuff to
yeah,
keep
I'm
things
pretty
healthy.
confident. Yeah, I'm confident with stuff like that now. But like I said, it was a learning process. When I first started, I wasn't. He's one of my best friends now, actually. He's called Frank. And he actually surrendered an animal in because he had health issues. But he's such a knowledgeable guy and he's helped me out so much with a lot of the things. So I'm grateful to have met him. And I've met so many good people who just support me every month now. So I can lean on people whenever I want. And I know I've got people who are more experienced than me to pass down the knowledge I need.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And then tell us about how do you go about finding people to adopt the animals out to? I mean, I'm sure you get lots of people just kind of coming in and wanting things, but how do you make sure that it's basically not going to enter the cycle? As you had mentioned, these animals just get passed around.
So typically, Facebook, my WhatsApp's linked to that. So I get a lot of WhatsApp messages, Google, Instagram, not so much. I've got a big following, but Facebook got about 1,000 and I share into local groups within the area. So people will inquire about an animal. I'll ask for the proof of setup. They'll have like some minimum standards to tick. And then if I'm happy with what I've seen, I'll give them an adoption form and then they can come down to the rescue to meet the animal, hold them, etc. And we go from there really. So
And do they pay?
yeah, so I'll just ask for a minimum donation. So, for something small like a corn snake, people usually donate, 40 to £60 or something like that. But it all helps out. As you
Oh
can
yeah.
imagine, electric bills a lot, stuff like that. So it all contributes. And some people are more generous, some people will give more than, you know, they probably should. And that's amazing. Those months really help.
If you're using halogen bulbs as a heat source, then the last thing you want to use is an on-off thermostat because then you'll actually flick the bulb off when the temperature is too high. And that's a distraction and an annoyance to your animal. It is much better and much preferred to use a dimming thermostat. That's why I want to tell you about Zoo Med's new product, the ReptiTemp dimming thermostat. This is a high accuracy dimming temperature control for your pet's habitat. It has both a daytime and a nighttime setting, so you could also use it to control something that's a non-light emitting heat source like a heat pad or a ceramic heat emitter or a heat projector. It has an adjustable ramp up and ramp down period for gradual temperature changes. And for me, I'm all about simulating sunrise, so you can slowly bring temperatures up. It is much more natural than just turning the heat on in one fell swoop. It has a sleek, low-profile housing as well as a battery backup, so you don't lose any of your data or your inputs on power interruptions. If you're someone who's striving to continue to replicate nature in its most natural form, then you need to have the ability to ramp your heat on and ramp your heat off. Turning things on and off aggressively is a lot for the animal to handle. It is much more natural for things to come up and off in a slow, gradual pace, just like Mother Nature. So if you're looking for something that can control your temperature in a much more accurate and fine-tuned way, make sure you check out Zoo Med's new ReptiTemp dimming thermostat. For more information on this or any other Zoo Med product, make sure you head to zoomed.com or check out the link in the show notes or the YouTube description. Yeah, it's one of those things that I think will always be some kind of issue within our hobby. And I'm not super familiar with the other pet keeping hobbies and if it's as much of an issue like in the aquarium hobby and whatnot. But I think the reptiles obviously we talked about this lots. They have they have characteristics that lend them to this sort of thing, living long and being a lot of them being very rugged, especially kind of like the bottom tier animals that are relatively cheap, right? They're for lack of a better word, hard to kill, and so they kind of hang in there for a long time. But you know, when you go to an expo, you see tons of animals for sale. You think, how many of these are actually going to end up in the right path? And even if you're you're a keeper with the best intentions, things can change where you have to move an animal along. And so I always say, the best thing to do is have a really good, strong keeping community of keepers around you. Because if you have a friend you're really close with that can take an animal for you for whatever, maybe a couple years, that's a good situation. Then maybe you can have an acquaintance within that circle to send an animal to. It's like we want the rescues to be kind of our fail safe. As somebody who's like, I don't have any, but none of my friends can take this animal. Like, can you take it from me? We don't want that to be like the safety net that's just cleaning up the mess for our entire hobby.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I think it's important, to build, at the end of the day, it's people's passion. So I think it's easy to make friends if people try, and I think it's probably the most important thing if you've got a lot of animals as well, have someone to lean on, because it's easy to accumulate them. But, if you've got to go on holiday or whatever, or like I said, family circumstances change, you need someone there for you. It's important. So all these things should be taken into account, when you do get the animals, and they live a long time at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We've got a boa 23 years old. So
sorry, can you say that again?
We've got a boa in now that's 23 years old, female. Wow. She's massive. But that's it just awesome. Shows, I had photos from like years and years ago. You could see the photo quality was bad, with the families, and that is nice. But it just shows you how long they live. So they do. You need support if you've got big animals like that as well.
Totally. I mean, even my crested gecko will be 20 years old this year. He was hatched in 2005. So it's like, that's crazy. I mean, that's a childhood birthday present that, I bought it myself, but I bought it in grade 11, and now I'm here, in my 30s, I had two kids of my own. It's just crazy how much your life goes through with just this gecko ever present.
What I think you've done well is the way you've kept the animals that you've got. Because I remember watching years ago, and the way that you haven't added loads and loads and loads. I think that's really good, because it's easy to do so, especially being on YouTube, isn't it? Like people want the news content and stuff. It's an easy way to make content, but you've done a good job. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, I was pretty resistant to that. Just space. Like, I mean, I kind of like you. I don't want to have my entire home filled with reptiles. I want to be somewhat respectful to the other people that live in my home as well. Not that it's, some people their spouses or partners are totally fine with that, but and realistically, my wife probably would have been okay with it too. But I don't want that. And plus, I want to be able to relax. I find like it can be very relaxing for me to be down here with my animals, but also sometimes it stresses me out when I'm like, I want to fix that plant. I want the glass is dirty. Like I remember that when I had a really big fish tank, it was in my living room, and it was just, it was never the clarity that I wanted it to be. And I was perpetually just angry in that room because I'm like, this tank doesn't look as good as I want it to be. But but yeah, it can be all consuming. It can really take over. So I'm curious if you have any tips or anything, because like I said, it's such a strong, especially if you're somebody who's very compassionate, it's easy to want to get into making a rescue. I mean, you see it all the time. I'm starting a rescue and it is very difficult. So do you have any tips for anybody that if they were starting, what can they do to make sure they're not going to fail instantly?
Like I said, I'm no expert. I've been doing this properly for 7 months, but I feel like I took my time with it and I feel very assured in knowing it will last. The first thing I did was, like I said earlier, ask lots of questions to people who've already been there and done it. So, I spoke on the phone with a few rescues. I even called Chaz the other day from Snakes and Adders. He was really helpful on the phone. But just asking questions and building a community is the most important thing, in my opinion. And then I'd say having some procedures in place so that people don't do you over. I've seen a lot of the times where people owe rescues money, they've let animals go and things like that. And as much as it isn't a business, I think sometimes you need to run it as a business in certain ways, like make sure the forms are filled in before you let any animals go, making sure people have maybe left a small donation to reserve, things like that. Because otherwise, if you just keep letting animals go and nothing coming in, you're just going to sink and it's going to collapse. So I think it's important to look at it, across the board and make sure you do it properly,
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it's actually okay to think of it as a business. I mean, it's not a business to profit, but it's a business that you need to hit. You want to be able to hit $0. You don't want to hit negative $50 or whatever. Like if you're losing $35 a day or something, that adds up really quick. You're losing $1,000 a month. It's not sustainable. And so you want to come up with systems of cash flow.
Yeah, exactly. Systems for cash flow. And just asking, being a bit more, a bit more forward. So I will ask for reviews, things like that. I'll take it off my own back to ask, because if you don't ask, people won't necessarily always give them you. And that's the way you can grow. So I think, if you ask, most people are generous enough to help you out. And I don't think you should be ashamed of that, because at the end of the day, you're doing a good service. And someone has to do it right. So
exactly.
You're doing a good service. And if you're passionate about it and you ask all the right questions, you can definitely do a good thing. And it's nice to wake up knowing that you're impacting things and give you a bit of purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have the people who come and adopt animals out, do they use you as a care resource as well?
Yeah, some people. So some people will come in and it's their first animal. Some people have had animals for years. So some people will lean on me for information. I'll give them what they can, but I'll also link them to kind of like Reptiles or good sources of information. Where they can kind of do their own research. And then when they're ready, they come back. So yeah, I try my best to help, but obviously when you get a lot of messages, it's hard to give everyone what they need. So I'll sometimes direct them to good sources. Yeah,
because you could easily overwhelm yourself like that. Have you ever had any species come through that was like completely like out of left field? Like have you had things that have shown up where you're like, I've never worked with this animal, or is it pretty much always just common species?
Yeah, I've had a couple actually. I had a call the other month about a red iguana.
Okay.
To be in the US, it's probably like they just walk around like dogs on the street, but in the UK it's different, right? So I had a call. There's like this, I've got this red iguana, I can't look after him. And I was like, okay. I thought I was going to turn up and get tail whipped and everything. And I got there and I fell in love with him. He's like a dog. He's so tame. You stroke his head. I've got a video on my Facebook, but you lift his head up when you stroke him. And I've ended up keeping him because when kids come around with their parents, he's a great ambassador. So we've ended up keeping him for the rescue. His name's Milo. That was one. We got a tegu come in the other week. He wasn't eating. Same thing. Luckily, touch wood, they've all been very friendly and they've been a nice experience. But I've had some very nasty snakes that have come in, which has been a challenge.
Sure. Yeah. Like what will you do in that situation? I mean, you have to almost adopt them out to an experienced keeper, or else you're going to have to keep them forever. Yeah,
like we've got a blood python in now and it's horrible. I put him in a viv and he was just striking at the glass. I didn't want him to hurt himself, so I moved him just into a rub setup just for now. But people like him, he's never going to be someone that, is going to be an animal that can be held, around kids, or so it needs to go to someone who's got experience with that species, or someone who's just extremely passionate about working with difficult animals, so to say.
Yeah. The best part about providing high-quality reptile husbandry is you get to develop a long-term relationship with your animal. Meet Jackson, my 18-year-old crested gecko. Jackson lives on the BioDude's Terrafauna substrate, which is one of their substrates that's specifically designed for warm biomes and humidity spikes. Like all other BioDude substrates, it contains organic content to help support the plant life in Jackson's vivarium. It also holds moisture very well, which means humidity is never an issue, even in my dry climate. Another favorite of mine is the BioDude's Bug Grub. This is a supplement powder made from natural ingredients like carrots, beets, spirulina, oats, and potatoes. Everybody knows how important gut-loading feeder insects is, and this simplifies it for me and allows me to be confident when I feed both Jackson and my tarantulas that they're getting the nutrients they need to thrive. Also, if you have a lot of babies right now, this is a great way to help fortify the diets of neonatal reptiles. The BioDude has a ton of great educational content on both his YouTube channel and the website, all about bioactive care, and it's just one of those brands that's doing their part to push herpeticulture into a positive direction and give reptile keeping a better name. Yeah, that definitely adds a challenge. So then as far as do you have personal animals that you can, like you said, the red iguana is now kind of a part of the team. He's got a long-term place there. Are there other animals that are technically yours that you will keep, or is it all kind of part of the rescue?
I've got a few that I've had for years, and my son Freddie's 6. He's obsessed. He's like my second helper. So we've got his animals, and he does like the main duties on them.
Oh, cool.
So we'll never get rid of them. So we've got like a tortoise, leopard gecko, corn snake, bearded dragon, ones that he can interact with. So we're definitely going to keep them. And when people come around, it's nice to get them out and show them what, examples of what you could have. And so it's nice. And I think like getting your kids involved with animals is great for them as well. It teaches a lot of responsibility. We've adopted quite a lot to, mothers with young kids. And it's nice to see the updates months on where the kids are cleaning out the animals and holding them. And it's nice to see. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and having a little helper is probably a good thing too for you. And as he gets older, he'll even be more helpful.
But he's like a 40-year-old man in a 6-year-old body at the moment, so he's good. He helps me out a lot. He's very good. He knows all the names. He's a beautiful boy, and he's like me. He's obsessed. So he's always watching YouTube shorts of animals and telling me facts. So it's good little father-son time as well.
Yeah. And just as I'm thinking, like, go ahead.
Have you got a child? I remember seeing you post ages ago. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We have a son. Actually, we just had a second a couple weeks ago. This is the first episode that I've recorded since the baby was born. So we have 2 boys now. But my oldest is 3.5. So he's just getting to the point where, I mean, he's grown up in a house of snakes, so he doesn't really think of it as anything cool or just like always there.
Oh, yeah. It's normal to them, right?
Totally
and then
normal.
They go to a rabbit and it's completely left.
Yeah. What is that? Yeah, so it's really cool. He hasn't like started helping me or anything. I mean, I don't really have. He could help me with waters maybe, but everything's big tubs. He's not strong enough to hold these things. But yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's gotten a lot busier, turns out. But it's been great. And just even as I'm just talking to you, like you can imagine an animal. Let's say a ball python's going to live 30 years. I think that you could make an argument saying that, let's say it spent 10 years with somebody in really good care, and then a rescue helps mediate its transition to another person that's going to care for it for 10 years in really good care. As far as the snake's concerned, that's not a huge deal. It doesn't have to be in the same home. It's when it's just getting tossed around over and over and the care starts to degrade. If you can help, if the rescue can serve the purpose of making sure that the care is good when it goes to the next home, as far as a snake is concerned, it really doesn't make a difference.
No, exactly. And we get a lot of that, like we do have loads coming from fantastic homes. So my job is to make sure that they carry on that same trajectory, I'm not going to say like, the rescue, I try and do what I can, but with 50 animals, it's hard to make them look like yours, for example. Yeah. But I do my best, and hopefully the homes that they do go to are even better than the rescue. That's my goal all the time. So I'll do my best. But yeah, you get the stories of people had like tortoises for 20 years, and it just gives them peace of mind knowing that, we take care of everything for them, and they know that 100% that where they go will be trusted and a good home. And sometimes I've even give the previous owner details to the new owner, and they've contacted each other, which is nice. And I'm completely out of it then. They'll WhatsApp people with pictures of the tortoises and whatever. And it's nice, especially for the kids, let's say they have to give up an animal and they can still see, the new animal doing good in the new home. So there's that as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. Then the people can stay on top of or stay in touch with the animal as it continues to grow.
exactly. Yeah. So it's important. Like I love it. I do love it. It's hard, but I love it. Um, and hopefully there's a lot more, people start it because we definitely need it, I think, in the UK. It's probably the same in other countries as well, but I feel like there's that many surrenders, especially where I am in the Midlands. There's so many every single week. And
Yeah.
eventually it could get to a point where, animals are bred every year, but, ball pythons and stuff live for 20 years. There's going to be a point where there's that many just floating around looking for homes. We got to do something about it.
Yeah, in some ways, it does seem like an impossible problem to solve. Just with even just the rescues themselves, like how are they possibly supposed to absorb all this? But you're right. Like the more there are, the better, and it's probably better to have more small rescues than one or two huge rescues, because the bigger the rescue, the harder it is to manage.
Yeah.
And if you have somebody that's kind of able to absorb some, I mean, I'm like the population of the UK is almost twice of Canada, and it's
Yeah.
it's in a small area of land. The province that I live in is bigger than the UK. So in my area, you do see, we have Kijiji, which is kind of like Craigslist. So you see the animals that are what I would classify as rescues, but there's just not as many.
Yeah.
But even here, there are still, there's a fair amount. So how do you conceptualize, like you said, you want to have a good relationship with the pet stores and things, but as from a rescue point of view, it would be totally reasonable if you despised pet stores, despised breeders, and despised expos. And I'm not saying that you do. I'm just saying, how do you conceptualize those three things, because they're kind of like the leading cause of your.
It's hard, and I'm not saying like pet shops are great. I love pet shops, and I don't think they're doing necessarily anything wrong. But what I would say is, if everyone can come onto common ground, because like some owners of pet shops, they're not that they're greedy, but they just want everything to themselves. I think there needs to be like an open line of communication. Whereas, for example, if they do sell a pet, they might give us our details for the future if anything were to happen. So we know that animal going into safe hands regardless, and it's never going to kind of take a step backwards. And I know most pet shops now do proof of setups to ensure that they're going to the right homes and things like that. So it has definitely improved, I'd say. But I think it's just like everyone being, reasonable with each other, and just coming together a bit more rather than being divided. That's what I would say, More pet shop as well, because we get it around mine, like, they all badmouth each other and whatever. But it shouldn't be like that. There's enough animals everywhere, so everyone can prosper. I just think that everyone needs to kind of help each other out a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think maybe in the future, breeding, maybe we don't need to breed as many animals, or however it works. I mean, it's so hard to quantify if we have too many animals circulating, and I think probably we do.
I just think that will never stop the amount of animals that are bred, because there's never going to be anything that's going to say, there's a certain number. Maybe there will be, but it's more like private breeding. People how many like royals are bred every single year. It's a lot, isn't it? So I just feel like unless there's something big changes, they're always going to keep coming and coming. But hopefully they filter into the right places. And maybe legislation things will help, especially for big snakes. I do think if something could be done for big snakes, not necessarily that they go on the DWA list, because obviously maybe that's a bit a step too far. But I think for things like retics and stuff, there should be something where you can't just get your hands on them straight away, in my opinion. They're just massive animals, unless you've got a room to dedicate, it's not going to be a good life for them, when they get to 20 odd feet.
Yeah.
It's just unmanageable, in my opinion, for the everyday person.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you're right about the breeding. I mean, how do you put a stop to it? And there's some great breeders out there that are working with amazing animals and doing a great job making sure their offspring find homes. But I think the biggest issue with breeding is it's just fun. It's an enjoyable process for people. It's like an advancement of their hobby. It's skills that they haven't had to learn before that they're now tinkering with, and they're producing these animals, which is probably some of the coolest experience you can have.
Exactly.
And in some ways, that's addicting.
I get why people do it. I get why people do it. It's just like, I can see both ends of it. Like, I get it from the back end of a rescue standpoint, but I also get it from a pet keeper. Like, you do chase that. I was looking for it for years, where you love your animals, but you get a new animal, you'll do the enclosure the way you want it, and it's like, what next? So that's why I see why people go into the breeding side of it, because it is that kind of evolving thing. But there is some good breeders out there, definitely. I just think it's the ones that, for example, like the wild type stuff, they tend to get left behind in certain things, and they're very overproduced, and everything kind of filters back down to rescues. So it's always going to be that way. But I think if there's a better way of managing it, or like I said, people being a bit more open with dialogue, because
Well, I think this way you've kind of conceptualized the rescue is different than I even think about it before. Like usually I would think of a rescue as basically animals being dumped on a doorstep, which I'm sure you've had potentially that as well. So maybe I'll ask you about some of those situations. But instead, the way you're kind of talking about it is it's more like a relationship with the community where if somebody really wants, if they know that they're going to need their animal to be relinquished in some capacity in the next 6 months, they could reach out to you, and then you have this relationship with them. And even if you're full at the time, you're kind of on a waiting list, and that the person isn't chomping at the bit to get the animal out of their door. They just know that there's going to be a path for it that they're comfortable with, and they're not going to just have to sell it to some random guy on the street. They know there's the animal is going to be well cared for. And I think that's a really important aspect of how you're explaining your rescue, is that it's a relationship. It's not it's like I said, in some cases it's an emergency relinquishment, but in many cases it's a planned thing that Jordan's going to take care of this animal and get it to the next step.
And I think maybe if we could get some rescue animals into pet shops, I don't know if that would work, instead of always buying new stock. I guess I understand why, I suppose, as an owner you do that, and I probably will be corrected, but if there's a way of getting more rescue animals back into pet shops, because they have got, more traffic, people come in more to pet shops, you're going to have that higher turnover of animals. Because there's some amazing, beautiful animals that come into rescues that would be great. And, people can sell them on in pet shop, and they would do so great instead of always buying stock. Yes. I don't know if that would help, but that's just an idea. Sure.
Now, have you had animals that have just kind of ended up somewhere, or that you've had to go pick up from abandonment or anything like that?
Yeah, I had a Horsfield tortoise the other month that was just left in a shoebox, which was sad. I've had loads of stuff like that. Had someone follow me with a corn snake out the car before.
just give it to you?
Yeah, just randomly turn up. What else have we had? Nothing that I'd say is terrible, but obviously some people, if let's say you've got that one animal, you don't necessarily see the health problems, you know what I mean? For example, like eye deficiencies from tortoises, people don't necessarily notice it. So it's not until we get them in and we treat them. Like I had one the other day that I think it was 18 years she had the tortoise, but it's had real bad eye infection, so I've got to take him to the vet. But to the normal eye, people wouldn't notice stuff like that. So
Yeah, if you only have one animal, you're not comparing it to other animals, so you just think what you're seeing is normal.
And people have got good hearts that just genuinely don't know.
Yeah.
And it's difficult because then we've got to pay for the vet bill, but it has to be done, and that's what you sign up for. So this is why it's important to build a community, in my opinion. Get some good people around you, and try and grow. Social media is massive, so I'm treating it like it's my job. I post so much now, it's ridiculous, but I know that it's going to help more animals. The more I grow, the more animals that we can help. So, and it's nice that we've got people sharing my stuff now and all that. So it all helps out. And this is what I mean by, I know I keep saying the word community, but if everyone can get together, vets, pet shops, rescues, and all work together, everything will be easier and smooth, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any species that when you get a message for someone that wants to surrender that you're like kind of, I don't want to say roll eyes, but you're like, not one of these again.
Turtles are the biggest problem.
Turtles? Okay.
I can only have a handful in at a time, because I just don't have the capacity to keep them. But turtles are very high on the surrender list. If I took them all in, I'd be overrun. I get calls all the time. So
they're so involved, like you have to have quite the setup.
Yeah, you need to know what you're doing. And it's not something that I'm really clued up on, I'm going to be honest, turtles. But I'm not sure if there's many sanctuaries in the UK, but it'd be nice if there was some more turtle places. That's high on the list. But yeah, most of it is your day-to-day stuff. You do get the odd like random thing, like I had a false water cobra before, Bredl's python, things that are a little bit rarer. But they tend to move on fast once they're healthy. But I've had oils corns in for ages, the same ones. And that's just part of it, It's nice when they go. That's the best feeling.
Yeah, a normal corn snake or a normal ball python finally finds a home.
Yeah, when I get a message like I'd like a wild type corn snake, I love it. I've got about 20, so you can come choose. There's so many in there.
Now, Would you consider doing like a YouTube channel or something else to kind of help create some cash flow for you?
I have got one, but it's not very good. I'm going to be honest.
Well,
I
that's how
just
they all
post
start.
shorts and stuff. Yeah, I just post shorts and stuff. I follow a lot of content creators in the animal space. I don't feel like I've got the personality for it in terms of like, the high end production and getting into that space. But I will get on camera quite frequently and talk about the animals we've got available. So I just try and post on all platforms at the moment and see where it takes us.
Yeah,
But
because that could be a form of revenue for you to help pay the
yeah,
bills.
yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I'm actually getting a van this week because it's been a nightmare trying to transport in my little car. So that's a step that might help. Yeah, I suppose it's you don't want to look at it like a business, like I said, where you're trying to generate profit, but at the same time, it needs to not profit, but you need to get that money back in. So some people are kind enough to donate vivariums and stuff that you could then sell on. So certain things like that help as well.
Do most of the surrendered animals just come in a bag, basically, or do quite a few people decide that they want to give up their enclosure as well?
A lot of people do like offer, and I always say yes because it does help us out. But also at the same time, you do get the odd, turn up in a bag kind of thing. But luckily, I've got it all set up, so there's normally space, and we can always help. I don't really turn any animal down, unless it's like something I just can't get to or something completely out of the ordinary. But this is why, it's good to build relationships with people where I can refer out or refer to different people. So that's the goal, to keep growing contact list, especially in the UK. It's a big place.
And I feel like you could, this would maybe not be super profitable, but sell some of the equipment that gets donated, right? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, so sometimes like if a beginner will come in and they want a corn snake and I've got something free, I could do like a bundle kind of thing. That helps. But yeah, I'm still trying to think of more ways I can grow it really. If I could do it full time, I'd love it, but I don't think I'll ever be in that position. So, and I do love my career, so it's always going to be something I'll do from home, I feel, and it does work well at the moment. So as long as I'm not losing money every single month, which I don't think I will continue to do it because I love it.
Yeah, and then you're the type of person that needs to be doing this sort of thing, and that's why I always worry about people who do the rescue, because it's like they have a heart that they want to help, but it can be so difficult, and it's in many ways it's an unsolvable problem. So you need to be clear about how you're going to tackle the problem, not just take like you said, if you'd taken every turtle in, you'd be, no pun intended, underwater for sure. And so you have to make hard rules for yourself to say like, I'm taking these ones in, I'm not taking these ones in. It's going to be a net positive, but this is going to at least secure the future of the rescue and not completely bankrupt me in a month.
Yeah, like I said when I called Chaz the other day, because he's obviously had his shop for years and he's a pet shop and he's probably the best in the UK in my opinion. But like, even I sent a video he posted today of his overheads and things like that, and it's just a shock. So it's hard for rescues because to take that next step into like a premise, you've got your overheads which are doubled or quadrupled, and then there's more pressure then to get more donations, adoption fees in. So I'd rather just for now just do it how I'm doing it, knowing that I can sustain it, rather than just push it a little bit too far too fast. So I'm happy with how it's going, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I feel good. It's nice to see, like I said, when they go to new homes, is a great feeling. It's nice.
And I guess it's conceivable that some of these animals will be there for like a decade, right? Like you may not get rid of some of the animals.
No, some of them may become, personal residents, personal pets, but I'm happy with that. I can always house a corn snake, It's just when it gets to 50 or something, that's when I have a problem. But
yeah.
Most of them are easy to look after, and they have a good quality of life here. I'm not saying it's like amazing, but I'll always do the bare minimum. Try and offer UV when I can, but most of the time, like I try and look at it as it's a temporary home. I'll do what I can, and everyone who comes in to adopt, I'll really try and vet them out in a good way to make sure they go to the right hands, because I want them to have a better life than where they are with me. That's
Do you think you'll do any like education shows or birthday parties or things along those lines at some point, or are you going to just mainly focus on operating the rescue?
Potentially. I've inquired about it. You have to have licenses to do shows and stuff. So I spoke to my council before. It might be something I look at in the future. Like I said, if it was something I'd done full time, I'd say yeah, because I'd be able to put the time into doing shows and try and run it all animals. But because I've got them over thing, I just do what I do now. But it's definitely a way I've been looking at. Or if I can get someone else to do the shows for me, so I don't actually have to physically be there. But there's ways of doing it for sure, and it does obviously, increase awareness, which
For
is
sure.
important.
Now, what about, I think you kind of named some of them, but are there any sort of major mistakes that you think you've made in the past 7 months that you would tell someone, like, do not do this if you're going to start a rescue?
I'd say always have a bit of cash reserve, just a little
Yeah.
bit. Like for example, that X-ray with the corn snake come out of nowhere. And it was like £600 immediately. I had to pay. So I'd say if you're getting into it, just try and like have a little bit of a buffer where you can just always constantly help yourself out if you need to. I'd say definitely have the right contact in terms of someone who can help you with small things like noticing a little problem here and there. Maybe it'd be a respiratory infection, or obviously I've learned this over time, but when I first started, I probably would have missed certain things. So I was lucky that I had someone there to help me pretty much straight away. Because the last thing you want is to rehome an animal out with problems. And even if it's a genuine mistake, which does happen, you'll feel terrible. So I'd say definitely build a network around you. That's my most important tip, I'd say.
Do you have a place that is a quarantine specific zone between the shed and the garage, or?
It's difficult. So I've got basically the garage is split into two. So I've got the left side and the right side. I try my best to put all the new kind of ones into this certain space, and I'll treat them all immediately. So I'm always doing tourist treatment. But the way it's set up, I can't give a full quarantine space, which is annoying. And if I did have the space, I would do that. But for now, I just kind of take them in, tackle them, make sure they're here for a couple of weeks to make sure there's no issues. And like I said, I'm always doing treatment and health checks just to make sure nothing spreads or goes to the new home in a bad way.
Yeah, that's key. Yeah, and certainly not, you don't want to take down the whole group of animals with some kind
Yeah.
of virus. I mean, fortunately, you're probably having quite a variety of species, so the chances of things necessarily passing from each other is a little bit less. It's not zero, but it's not like you have a room full of ball pythons where a nido can rip through or something.
Yeah.
Go through the
Yeah.
ball pythons, but maybe not the colubrids.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard, like when you got that many animals, it's hard to quarantine 20 at a time or whatever. And it's just space at the end of the day. But I try my best to keep on top of everything. We've had nothing at the moment. That's major. So I feel like I'm on the right path. But I'm always learning. Like I still learn now. There's probably things I'll look back on this in 2 years and think something that I thought was right was wrong. You're always learning.
Totally.
So, part of the game.
Yeah. Well, like I said at the beginning, it's so important that we have rescues as part of our herpetoculture community. Like we just need them. It's unfortunately, part of our hobby is animals that end up with nowhere to live. And whether that's just overproduction or people's life situation changes, the fact that they live so long, there's so many different things. And I think quite often we see the rescues as like a negative thing. And I think the way I'm kind of getting the vibe from you is it's more like a positive experience. It's like a stepping stone to get the animal to another home. And hopefully, I think that's a really good thing. I think to have it would be cool if you could have a table at your next expo type thing. If that, I think that would be a good thing for expos to include the local rescue as a free table to just make sure people have a connection, so they don't feel like they just have to sell it to some random guy, or sometimes the people even let them go or euthanize their own animals because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, I mean, like most people like the idea as well of giving an animal a second chance. I think it's just people don't think straight away, oh, I should try my local rescue to look for an animal, because you don't think that, you just think pet shop, don't you? When
Yes.
you want an animal. So I think it's, like I said, it's more awareness. And I think most pet shops will be open to the fact that, there are rescues that, want to grow and get more awareness. I know necessarily it might take away, trade from pet shops, but I don't think it has to be that way. And this is what I mean. If there's a way of getting more rescue animals into pet shops, give them another chance, it would help out a lot. Both, because there's some good animals. You do get some beautiful morphs. Like I had an Ocatee corn snake, underrated in my opinion. Like amazing animal, and they just get passed into rescue. So there is some out there. It's not always your wild types and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice if we could get together a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jordan, this was great. Again, I love highlighting people who are doing the right thing in the hobby and trying to help us from, becoming a hobby of just consumption. And we have having these safety nets is so important. Is there anything that we didn't say or mention today that you wanted to make sure you did before we wrap up?
No, it was great. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I just hope that we get some more rescues going. It'd be nice to see in the UK, the US, and just hopefully, there's so many animals that need help. I can't express it enough. And a lot of people don't see it on the service level, but I'm getting messages daily. I know a lot of rescues are like overwhelmed. So if anyone's watching who's looking for an animal, please contact your rescue. If you're a pet shop, don't forget to reach out to your rescue, and let's just kind of come together and make a big difference.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's very well said. Can you let everybody know where they can find your content online, and more information about the rescue?
Yeah, so every platform, it's Midland's Reptile Rescue. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So you can find us all there. And
awesome.
Say hi.
Cool. Well, Jordan, thank you so much. This was a pleasure. I really appreciate having you on. We'll have to touch base again in a couple of years and see how it's going.
Amazing. I'll still be here.
Excellent.
See you then, mate. Thank you.
All right. That is the end of that episode. Thank you so much for listening. Jordan, thank you for jumping on the podcast and sharing your philosophy around the work that you do. I think it is just so important that we do treat rescues as a stepping ground to help animals move from one place to another. And I think obviously many people do think of them that way, but quite often they're thought of this sort of dumping ground for sick and unwanted animals. And people don't think of the rescue as a place to go buy. And maybe it's even the way we talk about it. So a rescue almost sounds negative, where it really should be seen as a new place to go pick up a new animal if you're interested, and just having a stepping stone from one home to another. And again, it's not to judge the people who no longer want the animals. It's more or less how can this be a positive force in our community and continuing to drive us towards more ethical keeping. So Jordan, thank you so much. Listeners, if you enjoyed the episode, please let us know in the comments or on Spotify or on YouTube. You can reach out to Jordan at the links below at his Instagram or the other social media links that I have provided there. And I think that is it for this episode. If you're looking for an Animals at Home t-shirt, you can head to animalsathome.ca/shop. $5 does automatically get donated to the Amazon Rainforest Conservancy. And if you'd like to help the podcast get produced on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, you can check us out at patreon.com/animalsathome. Every dollar there does go towards either editing or server space and all the different things that you have to pay for to make sure the podcast continues to go. And I think that is it for this episode. Again, there'll be a little bit of stretch between episodes, just kind of as we get back on our feet with another baby in the house. All is well on my end. It's just busy, and I think that's the only way to say it. It's very busy, and there's not a lot of sleeping happening. So that's just the nature of having another baby. And I think that is it. I will catch you guys in the next episode.